meeting. So I'm going to ask Ian to start recording, which I think he has. Thanks, Ian. And I think Glyn, if we go to the next slide, and we'll hand over to Michelle to kick us off today. I think Michelle has just left the meeting. We'll see if she's able to join in a second. We'll give her a couple more minutes.
Good morning, guys. Can you hear me?
Yes, all good, Michelle.
Yeah, good.
Okay.
Hi. So I'm Claire today. So today I'm going to speak about the vision of our service, how we've been working very closely with FutureGov in order for us to provide a good high standard benefits and housing needs service for our residents and for people who are approaching as homeless, sorry. And so on to the next slide. This is our Hackney Council tube map, as we all know, and this is about how we can support our residents with different support needs. So as we approach and our customers are triaged, we have the orange line. This is for customers who are able to self-source and can take instruction and do things for themselves and are very independent. So we provide them general advice and give them the tools so they can go along to do what they need to do. With the light blue line in the middle, those are for residents or customers who need a little bit more encouragement, may need a little nudge with what they need to do to get their homelessness resolved. You know, they can access the shared plan or a little nudge from the SMS waiting tool and also the SMS texting tool, sorry. And so then that also helps them. So that's people who have just some barriers as to them being able to resolve their issue. We also have the dark blue line at the bottom, and that's for residents who have high support needs, and they may have different professionals involved, and we all work together to be able to provide as much information, networking and partnership working to provide them with a service to meet their needs and to help them find or maintain a settled accommodation. And so here we have what the level of service our residents will need. So I'll start here in the corner at the dark blue, which is the multidisciplinary teams. That's for people who are very close to homelessness and they have very low strengths and definitely need a more high level of support. On the blue line, which is coaching and support, that's for people who need some encouragement. They need just some advice to be able to know what to do. We can signpost them and we can also give them advice on what they need to do to be able to access private rented accommodation and access funds for self-sourcing. And lastly, on the orange line is for people who have high strengths, they're self-supporting, they may not be so close to homelessness at that time, but with the information we give them, they'll have that general advice and guidance to be able to move forward and not become homeless. And I will hand over to you, Glyn.
Okay, great. Thanks very much, Michelle. So just a quick run through what we looked at the last show and share. So we did an update on the snapshot and how we were also progressing with the shared plan. We also looked, bearing in mind the change of team size and content, what our priorities were going to be going forward. And at the end, we did an activity about what your perceptions were of the tools we'd developed together and how easy you felt it was to use them and how useful you thought those tools were. And moving on from that last item, we then we'd done some analysis of the activity we did at the end of the last show and share, and I'm just going to briefly run through that now. So the first slide is just kind of the number of tools, or the average number of tools that particular teams are using here. So you can see there's a bit of a spread here, and going right up to the settled homes team, which are using all 5 of them. A caveat here might be that obviously we didn't have everyone attending that show and share, and so some of the results are a bit skewed. I think we had one person from the settled homes team who's obviously very enthusiastic, but you can broadly see that there is a difference in the kind of take up of the tools that we've got. And then, okay, which are the particular tools that we're using the most? I think that there aren't any huge surprises here. Single view is the one that's being used most, but also the SMS tool and the waiting time tool. In terms of which tools particular teams are using, I think we noticed that Snapshot and Shared Plan is being used a bit more by the kind of housing needs service, those who are doing housing assessments. Waiting time tool, again, you'd expect that to be used by supply. So yeah, that was what we got from that. And then this was what you felt about the tools, in particular the shared plan, the snapshot and the doc upload. And again, there's a strong trend here for all three tools really, which is you felt that they either could be useful or they would be useful, or they are currently useful to you. You know, it's skewed towards kind of 4 and 5 here, which I guess in a way begs the question, why, if the general perception is that these are useful tools, why are they not being used across the kind of service more? And maybe this next slide gives a bit of an explanation for that. And this is asking you how confident you felt in terms of using these actual tools. And here the skew slightly towards the other end. So got more people feeling less confident with using some of these tools, particularly maybe the shared plan for some of you. And so that led to an activity which we're going to be talking about a bit more later, in terms of how do we build people's confidence in using these particular tools. So now I'm just going to briefly go through what we're going to be showing you today. So myself, Thomas, Emily, Cameron and James are going to be talking about how we're trying to embed some of those tools into our day-to-day practice, in particular Snapshot, the multidisciplinary plan and doc upload. Kaz is going to give us a lightning update on triage development. Ian Jones will be talking about the COVID-19 hotel plans, what we've done, what we're doing, and what we plan to do next. And Dina is going to be talking about moving the duty lines to customer service. But before we begin, for those of you who felt that the Finding Settled Accommodation video could not have been any better, you're in for a treat, because we're about to show you version 2.
What to expect from the council during your search for a settled home. Due to the housing crisis, there is a severe shortage of social housing available in Hackney, and over 13,000 households are currently on the waiting list. For the majority of our residents, the best option to find settled housing is in the private rented sector.
Affordable social housing
I don't know.
in other parts of the country, and we can help you secure this. Otherwise, we can help you to find your own private rented property.
We will help you to understand what is suitable and affordable so that you can look for properties on your own. Finding a suitable home is not about size only. It is also about making sure it's safe, lawful, and that it meets your household's needs.
Affordability is making sure you have enough money left over after paying your rent. We can advise you on how you may be affected by the benefit cap, the local housing allowance rate, and also maximizing your income from any benefit that you receive.
Visit hackney.gov.uk to see tools other residents are using to find settled homes.
Fantastic, spectacular stuff. I think we'll all agree. So next, we're going to be talking a bit about how we're trying to embed some of the tools we've developed into our practice. So Thomas is going to be talking about how we're trying to embed doc upload and Snapshot into the benefits teams. I'll be talking about trying to use Snapshot at the greenhouse alongside homelessness assessments. And Emily, Cameron and James will be talking about using multidisciplinary shared plans. Okay, so I'll hand over to Thomas.
Good morning, everyone. I think this is the first time you're hearing from benefits, but we have been beavering away on some of the tools. So I'm very happy to report that the new tools have helped us to deliver some of the objectives we've always had. One big thing was we've always wanted to close down the benefit email box. Now I'm happy to report we have successfully done that, and we could have done that without some of these new tools. So the benefits of this has been that we have now seen a slight increase in the take-up for the e-change of search form. That form allows the customers to report the changes of circle online, and upload evidence during submission and after submission. And the key thing to note about that form is that it is integrated with the back office systems. Some of the changes that customers report, you could see on the right, which are tax credit changes, moving address, income, etc., etc. Next slide. Right. Now, one of the tools which Glenn just mentioned will be the document upload. We would not have done this, we would not have closed the mailbox without this tool, for the one single reason that we do not have upload facility for new claims. But now we have it. We'll quickly close the mailbox, and you can see in the last just 2 weeks or so, you could see the massive difference this tool has made. You could see the take up for the tool. For June, for instance, a quick start, we had only about 80 documents uploaded. Now you could see progressively it went up, but the key change you see September, which is just like a couple of weeks, we've had 792 documents uploaded, and this data is only up to the 14th of September. So we are very happy and very confident that we are using the tools in the way they were designed to be used. Now, Snapshot. This particular tool gives us opportunity to do kind of a culture change in our work culture, because prior to this, benefit service officers, we were mainly focused on taking your name and address, income, your household composition, everything we needed to be able to calculate accurately what you're entitled to. But we didn't do anything beyond that apart from just detecting and preventing fraud. But now we're fully engaged in trying to identify your vulnerabilities and strengths, and these tools is what we needed. Now, what we have done to get there, and especially to try and raise staff confidence and ensure that we can fully embed this as quickly as possible, we had staff consultation on this, on various things, and Emily and the team were very key to this. Now, some of the things that came out there, one was the things we worried about. Staff were worried that maybe this will sort of impact on their performance targets. So we decided to adjust the performance targets for the benefit officers to allow them time to carry out the snapshot assessments. In addition to that, we carried out a refresher, which was very recent. I think we're the last group to have a one-on-one refresher from Emily. And also there was the famous video, which went down very well, which you probably get more responses on. And those two things, now I could safely say that all benefit officers are fairly confident and will be using the snapshot and all the other tools that we've got at hand. Now, the next step only is monitoring, because this is really early days. So we will monitor the impact of the tool and how much usage we've got out of this, and we will continue to report. One quick thing is to say thank you to everybody involved, to the teams who were very crucial to this, and the ICT. So let's watch this space. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much.
I hand over to Glenn now.
Thank you, Thomas. Okay, so I'm going to talk briefly about how we've been trying to use Snapshot in homelessness assessments down at the greenhouse. So at the last show and share, one of the questions that cropped up was, how would we use Snapshot alongside a homelessness assessment? Would we do it at the time of doing it? Would we do it afterwards? If so, is there a possibility that people might forget to do it? So we thought we'd try and investigate that with 4 officers down at the greenhouse. It's fairly early days on that, and what we found is some of the meetings actually coincided with the kind of one day where single view lost access to jigsaw data, which is now fixed. So we're going to be doing a lot more testing on this, but we have had some feedback already. So, for example, I think at least 3 or 4 of the officers said it's quick to fill in the snapshot, but they did notice there's some duplication in terms of what's being picked up there. And they felt if they were filling in jigsaw at the same time, maybe they would do the snapshot afterwards. One officer liked gathering the kind of vulnerabilities of a customer via using prominent notes on Jigsaw, which is great because it's one of the first things you see on notes. The only thing there, of course, is if someone isn't in Jigsaw, then they don't necessarily see that particular item, or they just see it as part of the overall activity feed. All of them like the fact that you have links attached to the kind of vulnerabilities that you tick and the strengths that you tick here, and those links suggest ways you and the customer might actually resolve those. So they like the fact that it wasn't just a kind of passive gathering of data, it also prompted you to maybe do something or help that customer in a particular way. And the fact that everyone would obviously see all the same links would kind of promote consistency throughout the service. So they like that, or people like that. Again, as I said, there's more testing to be done on that. So there's some meetings, I think, occurring Thursday, which we're going to have a look at how Snapshot worked with those. And also out of this, we recognise that Snapshot might fit best with running alongside triage. So we're going to try and catch up with customer services to see if we can test it out with them. Okay, so the next slide is going back to that earlier analysis of how confident people felt about using tools. And in this case, it was Snapshot in particular. So from the activity, we learned that some people, while thinking a Snapshot might be useful, they didn't feel confident in how to use it. And so we thought we'd investigate if a video is a good way of kind of giving people some confidence. So Emily has built a video, and we've rolled that out to those officers who are doing the Snapshot with Thomas for benefits, and those officers at the greenhouse I've just been talking about. And the initial feedback on this looks really positive in terms of what people are saying. One person said Snapshot in itself is so intuitive that video is hardly needed, but it is really useful. I think in the conversations I had, people said the video is really clear and it explains it well. Some of the feedback we had from the Google form we used to get feedback said training notes running with the video would be useful too. And this is some of the actual data that we got from the Google form we used to see what people thought of the video and how it gave them confidence or not. So we got about 30 responses to this. And you can see the first graph is how confident people felt before they watched the video. And you can see it's skewed towards 1 and 2, 3 people less confident in doing that, in using Snapshot without any guidance. And then the second graph is how confident were people in using Snapshot after they watched the video. And you can see that kind of skewing is moved to the other side. So people in general are feeling more confident once they've watched the video. So you've got about 20 people there, between 4 and 5, saying they've got a reasonable level of confidence to use Snapshot after they've watched the video. So that looks like a promising avenue to use for when we're trying to build up people's confidence in the tools. And Emily's already developed, I think, one for I think it's doc upload and shared plan. Not sure about the shared plan actually. Okay, so next I shall hand over to Emily, Camrul and James, who are going to talk about multidisciplinary shared plans.
Thank you, Glenn. And yes, there are also videos available for shared plan and document upload. So we'll make sure that we send all of those around the service afterwards as well. And please do continue to give us feedback on those videos to see what's missing and what we can improve. But I'll start by talking a little bit about the shared plan pilot that we've been mentioning over the last couple of show and shares. And really, we're talking a lot about the shared plan, but this is giving us a bit of a chance to run an experiment and measure some outcomes. I'm just going to pop you on mute for a sec, Cam. Measure some outcomes to see if this saves staff time in casework not getting caught up in email chains. If this improves the experience for staff by working towards a shared goal, working with teams across benefits and housing needs as well as other services, as well as improving the experience for residents because they have more transparency and ownership over their plan, and also if this is resulting in better outcomes for residents. So if that's making progress towards an outcome or actually achieving that outcome. But now I'll hand over to Cam, who'll tell us a bit about his experience working as part of one of these multidisciplinary teams and creating a shared plan.
Thank you, Emily. Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone's well. So discussing the shared plan, what we had was an email, just a single email from various sources with regards to a client we had on a temporary accommodation. Several complaints were made with this client with regards to their suitability and living condition as well. The client would not consider any private tenancy and wanted to wait for a council property to be available for themselves. TA team were in regular contact with the client and trying to persuade her to move to private tenancy and were very unsuccessful. With the meeting with the managers from temporary accommodation team, homeless team, Emily, and myself, what we identified from that meeting is the key strength and the weaknesses of the client. From the key strengths and weaknesses as well, I used single view Snapshot as well as Academy to find out what I need to know about the client. What we did from there was we created a shared plan. A virtual meeting was set up with the placement team, and then we discussed what we're going to do in terms of step-by-step action plan, which is on your right-hand side on the screen. What we did, we set a target date of what we're going to do and each step of the action plan and where we're going to take it from there onward. So what I did was I contacted the client and I spoke to them and I asked them, the situation, and it took me a long while to, get through to the client that the best way forward for herself and family is to move to private tenancy. It took me a while to persuade and negotiate as well with her. And finally, we managed to convince the client that the best way forward is to place her into private tenancy. Now, going back to the single view and vulnerabilities and the snapshots, what that enabled me to do is identify the client's income, the client's suitability, affordability, as well as anything that will impact her application for any sort of property. So what we did was, after creating the shared plan, speaking to the client, they managed to engage with us and agree that the only way forward for themselves is to move into private tenancy. So they, reluctantly accepted that we're going to, actively search for properties. And from that onwards, the client is actually actively searching for property on Rightmove, Gumtree, and other sources of, search tools to find a property. The good news is that after all this, what we got from the shared plan is across the services, using all the tools that are available, the action plan set out what we're going to do, and it was clear as well on the shared plan of what we're going to do as well. And I think using the shared plan across the board, all the teams would identify all the things that we've done so far, and it's helped our client. And this has been shared with the client as well, so they can have a look at what we've done so far and action set as well. Some of the things we want to improve in terms of the shared plan is making sure we regularly update every information possible for the client so that we can identify anything that we need to going forward with any action plan set for the client. And also to link shared plans to case notes as well. And one of the things that we couldn't do is remove any action plan set on the shared plan. So if we create a new shared plan, we couldn't delete it. So the only thing we could do is just advise users not to use a shared plan currently and use the alternative one. I'm going to hand you back over to Emily. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Cam. It's such a brilliant story of how you're working with other teams across the service to that shared outcome for a client. So thank you for sharing that. I think it's James now who's going to tell us about the Homelessness, Health and Housing MDT.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, I'm James Hunt. I'm the Head of Housing Management in the Housing Directorate's Housing and Neighbourhoods Directorate. The Homelessness and Health and Housing multidisciplinary team was the adult social care and housing needs team. And what that was trying to do was bring together all these services you can see on screen to try and get an understanding of the increasing complexity in cases we were seeing across all services. Yes, to remove some blockages about how those cases were dealt with, but to try and embed how we could change the service and work better together for the betterment of those people. So it was paused because of COVID, but we're restarting it. And I think there's lots of good reasons why we are. One, that we have this new way of working, and there's a lot more tools that will help us work together better. We have residents living in temporary accommodation with multiple and complex needs, and I think we're seeing more of that. And we need to work better together, and we need to work in collaboration more and more. And we want to then use this new homelessness, health and housing multidisciplinary team to embed some of the ways that we're working. So instead of basically helping you and supporting you to get better outcomes for the people you see. So how will that work? So we will meet monthly, and the oversight panel will be made up of senior managers who will look at cases that come forward. They will reflect on some of the best avenues for those particular cases. And what we will do is create shared plans for those multiple disciplinary teams to work together on. And that will be assigned to those officers and those teams. And day-to-day working will be done through the shared plan. It's open to everyone to see. It'll be shared with the resident, and we can get a better, hopefully get better outcomes for those people. What the oversight panel will then do is reflect upon those practices and obviously highlight good working practices that work well, and trying to remove some of the blockages and some of the areas that need to be improved, and then try to re-embed that back into the system. So everyone's working better together. We're using information in real life cases to help us do that, and it should be better for the people we're helping support. So all in all, very good. I hand you over to Jennifer, who will talk about, I think, some of your new recruits.
Hi, everyone. So last Friday, I was part of a recruitment panel, and I'm really pleased to say that we've appointed 2 social workers to work in the service, embedded within the service for the next year as a pilot. So we've appointed Sibongeli and Offway. One of those is Offway is an adult social care generalist social worker. He has previously worked in Croydon. He's previously worked with St Mungo's. He's previously been a social worker in a hospital. So huge amounts of involvement with homelessness, but actually because he's a professional, skilled social worker, he has more tools within his grasp to help us fill some of the gaps that we experience in the service. So that's Offway. And Sibongeli is a social worker who's currently with the mental health team in Elft. She, in a previous life, was a housing officer before she retrained to become a social worker. She's been a social worker for decades now, extremely experienced, a very good rep, and can really already see where the gaps are in our services between ourselves, mental health and adult social care, and those tricky pain points we have for residents that are failing in temporary accommodation and not sustaining their placements because of their complex needs, and also those that are entering the service, whether they're coming from prison, from hospital, off the streets, wherever they're coming from, those with complex and multiple needs that need that little bit more support. So we're aiming for them to start in 3 weeks' time. Hopefully, what's that, the 5th or the 7th of October, somewhere like that. So as I said, it's going to be a pilot. So we'll be placing them at different parts across the service. To begin with, Jan and Carol will take one each. They will be supervised within their own professional settings in the mental health teams and adult social care. But for everyday kind of stuff, they'll work with Jan and Carol and their team managers, just so they've got a home for issues. But they will be used across the whole service, and we'll be working with Emily to look at the outcomes and how we best use them. So I think they'll fit in really well. I think they'll work really well with you guys. And I think you'll find them a tremendous resource, and hopefully it should make your lives a bit easier, mean that people like Francis can sleep at night, and also make life a bit easier for those residents so that we don't see a constantly revolving door of people coming in the front door with failed placements and then ending up disengaging and then reappearing. I think our record so far is 16 placements for one individual who was a care leaver. So there's definitely some good improvements we can make with that. That's it. I don't know. Has anyone got any questions with that? Or, oh, we're handing over to Kazim. Brilliant. You can tell I'm new to this, can't you? Thanks, guys.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. So I just want to talk to you a little bit about the triage work that we've been working on. So currently, Michelle, Cam, Lola, Wojciech, B and Sherelle and myself have been putting together some triage documents. Now, what we discovered prior to having these discussions is that there were clients that had quite high earnings or had quite high savings in their bank account, and they weren't necessarily in need of our service. So what we're trying to do is we're actually trying to see if we can combine some of the triage documentation in with the shared plan. I don't know what that looks like at the moment, but it's a discussion that we're having. We're trying to get clients prepared for the facts of housing within London, which Genevieve touched on briefly in the video, that social housing and council housing is very, very difficult, and we are more and more moving over to the privately rented sector. So this kind of project has been done in various stages. So the first stage was getting Jigsaw updated with a new tab called Financial Snapshot, and a massive thank you to Glyn for supporting us with that. So we're at stage 2 at the moment, where we're trying to finalize the documentation that needs to be given to clients at triage. Now, being the manager of the greenhouse, I'm talking about mainly singles in this context. And then the next stage after that would be to see what documentation can actually be included in the shared plan, and if it can be included, how can it be included? So we're going to be going into like a testing phase, I guess, almost, from the 21st of this month, where Cam's team will be creating shared plans and sending these to the clients at triage stage. So we're going to try it out. We're going to get customer feedback, and we'll change it and adopt it as and when needed. So that's everything from me. So I will hand it over to Ian to talk to us about our COVID pathway and COVID hotels. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Kaz. Yes, I've been asked to give a quick or a lightning update on the COVID-19 hotel response. Those of you who know, I've never done anything lightning speed, but we shall see what we shall see. Just to give you very quickly some background, in March, the government called for everybody in. Effectively, this is an arrangement to ensure that everybody who was in danger of rough sleeping or was rough sleeping was able to be swept up and placed in emergency accommodation in commercial hotels. In Hackney, that meant we initially ended up housing 219 people, mostly, almost exclusively single people, and we picked those up again through our SORT team, our street homelessness team, via the greenhouse, people that approaches there, and also hospital discharge. So there was quite a mixed bunch of people that we picked up. But it wasn't, in Hackney's perspective, we decided it wasn't just about providing them with a roof. It was much more about a more collective package. So we made sure that they had access, or their security was on site. They had access to hot food, access to clothing if they needed replacement clothing, sundries such as toiletries, etc., etc. But almost as importantly, if not more so, we wanted to include a access to health services and public health services. So GP nursing staff, mental health provision, drug and alcohol support, provided within the setting of the hotel. so they didn't have to go out and access those. Those were parachuted in. Largely, we managed to do that. Again, it would have been, trying to even to mirror to some extent what they would have got had they turned up at the greenhouse. Yes, sorry, Glenn, you can go now. So what worked well? We were very good at that, actually. Getting 219 people housed within literally about 10 days was an enormously stressful piece of work, but we managed to do it very well. We identified that we do have some heroes right across the service, not just those who were at the front line, but in the background. Everybody worked really hard to get this together, get people in place, make sure that any barriers were, we found ways of working. People working laterally, people thinking outside the box. It was really good stuff to see. But in terms of, and I said it's not worked well, but in terms of perhaps a better term would be what we've learned from this, is we not necessarily shouldn't have to rely on those heroes. What we would really like to see is that as being part of normal custom and practice, that we recognise that these are going to happen, events like this will happen, and we have structures in place which are able to respond and be able to deliver those sort of services at short notice without having to actually, effectively call on individuals to step up to the mark. The other thing we're starting to see, and it's just a trend that we need to keep an eye on, is we're danger of losing impetus with some of those that we've placed within the accommodations. Effectively, we got them in, we got them fed, we've got them clothed to a certain extent, we've got them engaged with treatment. But to a certain extent, because we're now moving into sort of month 4, 5, and 6 in some cases in this instance, it's about how do we keep them engaged in that process. So it's not just about, having got them through the door, giving them a key and put them in touch with other people. It's about how do we keep them in the loop. So again, it's getting back to the stuff that Cam was talking about and Kaz was talking about, bringing these into and using these toolkits to keep people informed, having the conversation, even if we haven't got anything concrete new to give them. Again, many of these, some of those, for example, those with no recourse to public funds, we won't have many concrete updates to give them, but it's always good to keep them engaged and chatting and not chatting, but at least, finding out where they are on the pathway and perhaps suggesting alternative routes they may want to take. We've also seen a significant amount of new flow, new people to the streets, people who are effectively being swept up by the outcomes of the COVID-19 crisis. Economic issues, other issues with regards to accommodation. So again, it's not just that we've got, a fixed number of people who we've been able to accommodate. We've got people coming into the service on a regular basis, quite a high number. So again, it's about how we're managing that. SORT team are dealing with that largely at the moment, but also in terms of getting them engaged with public health services. And again, if the flow continues to increase at the rate that it is, those services will become overwhelmed unless we are, able to give a more concrete response to those. Good. Okay, moving them on. What next? In for good, as we've said there. Effectively, those with low needs, we effectively want to try and move into the private sector, and have done so largely. As I say, we're at the peak, we had 219 people housed. We the last count 109 within the emergency accommodation. So that's nearly half of those people we've been able to move on. Big up to Claire's team, to Carol's team, the housing option staff, to manage to get those in. Obviously, they would largely be those with low needs, and we've been able to move into the private sector. And now we have a more trying to switch the focus to what we're going to do those with more significant support needs, because it's not just about providing them somewhere to stay, but it's also sustaining them in that accommodation once we move them on and moving them onto the pathway. So in terms of the move on options, we will, the primary plan for this group will be we're looking to lease 2 new hotels, which we want to convert into an enhanced supported accommodation, temporary accommodation, for want of a better term, which will be effectively mirror largely the services they've been getting within the emergency provision, but in a more settled site, so a more long-term viewpoint. However, a lot of this is obviously expensive and it will depend on funding we can attract. We've made bids to MHCLG and to the GLA and have been arm wrestling, and Jennifer will bear that out in terms of trying to, persuade them that, that our visions are actually, much more robust than the standard offer in order to get them to people to, to actually get them to fund that. Even if the MHC GLA funding doesn't come through as we would hope, or in to the extent that we would hope, these are still good plans. And at some stage, we're going to have to, find another way of delivering that type of service, because that's where we have a shortfall. It's the enhanced support accommodation that we need to maximise. So again, it may mean that these plans are delayed or prolonged, but they will we will try and follow a similar route. The idea, of course, of all of this is building a robust pathway. So these people are moving out from emergency accommodation into more settled accommodation and ideally, eventually into general housing needs or general needs housing much further down the line. And so let's build in this robust pathway that adds an employment option, adds in drug and alcohol support where needed, mental health support. It's all about more than just the roof. But the key for us is this is being delivered by specialists. We are not asking housing needs officers to deliver these services. We get people in who actually, are commissioning people in to deliver the appropriate service and give them the support that they need. So again, we're not overburdening our general needs housing population. We are building in a very distinct supported pathway. That's me. I'm going to hand over now to Dina and to, just Dina apparently. We've got to be, again, as she says there, moving duty lines updates.
Thank you, Ian. Good morning, everyone. I just wanted to discuss and give you a bit of background on the duty lines that were transferred over to customer services. So back in April, the learning development team were asked to deliver training to customer services staff to enable them to take over the housing needs duty lines. Previously, all these calls were dealt with by the housing needs back office teams. It was agreed that customer services would now take on these inquiries in order that housing needs teams could focus on more complex cases and prioritise their workload. This would also bring the housing needs teams in line with the benefits teams whose calls are currently being dealt with by customer services. The learning development team, who are Tom, Dean and Lorraine, work together with Cameron from customer services, the housing needs team managers and Sarai from ICT to develop a training programme. We had to consider the type of inquiries most frequently received, and we discussed the processes and applications that customer service staff would need to receive training on to deal with these calls effectively. A Google working document was compiled by the housing needs teams. This was also made available to customer service staff so they could refer to it for more specific scenarios, and it also provided them with some sort of guidance on dealing with queries. They also received more in-depth training on systems like Jigsaw and UHT, and we also offered them guidance on how best to utilise the waiting time tool when dealing with housing register inquiries. The L&D team were also instrumental in creating an email template for customer service staff to use when reporting repairs issues to agents that manage the privately leased TA properties. Customer service have said they found this really useful and time-saving, and we also made available to them a directory of the hostel managers and the hostel that they manage. Again, a useful tool for them. The housing needs duty lines were rolled out in stages, starting in May with the housing register team. The training was delivered over a 1-week period, and we went live the following week. Staff were given 2 weeks to embed the learning and to provide some feedback, which was used for the next rollout. The feedback was really positive, and we only had to make some minor tweaks. Part of this project also involved developing a single Google form that could be used for escalating the more complex and urgent inquiries. The form populates a Google sheet, and the details of the cases to be escalated were populated on this particular sheet, and they were accessible by the housing needs teams and is monitored by the team managers. Sorry, could I have the next slide, please, Galinia? Thanks. So far, the duty lines have been rolled out to 5 of the teams: Housing Register, the Supply Team, Housing Advice, the Medical Team, and more recently, the Temporary Accommodation Team, who went live on the 9th of September. The L&D team delivered training to 36 staff from customer service, many of whom were very familiar with the work that housing needs undertake, and were so really quick in learning how to learn the new processes and the applications that would help them with the calls. The benefit of the Google escalation process is that it provides a clear audit trail of the cases that have been escalated and the actions taken. This should help to reduce complaints, especially as the seat has been monitored on a regular basis. The feedback from customer service staff is that they found the training to be really helpful in dealing with these queries, and the escalation process enables them to be more effective in managing customer expectations. Since May, when the first team went live with the transfer of the duty lines, the contact centre have received in excess of 17,000 calls. So if we estimate that each call would take in the region of about 10 minutes, which is probably a fairly conservative estimate, that would save the equivalent to just under 3,000 hours dealing with telephone inquiries. And this is time that the housing needs teams can reclaim to carry out other work. And in terms of the number of escalations, in a proportion to the number of calls that we've taken, the numbers are relatively low. This would indicate the customer service teams have been really effective in dealing with all the calls that they've had to deal with. And it has been a great success for both customer services and housing needs. I'll now pass you over to Emily for the next set of activities or questions.
Thank you so much, Dina.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Sure.
Right, Dina, what's happened to the temporary accommodation income duty line?
We haven't, that wasn't one of the teams that we were, I mean, obviously we are looking at what other teams that are going live in terms of the duty lines. So we are still considering that. So this is an ongoing project. If that's something, I know your team wasn't actually one that we were asked to look at, but obviously we can take that on board, Yomi, for the next time, not a problem. So we can arrange to meet with your team and we can go and discuss that as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, Yomi. And I just wanted to extend a huge thank you to everyone who's been part of the presentation today. It's no small thing to speak in front of 175 of your colleagues. So Michelle, Glyn, Thomas, Cam, James, Kaz, Ian and Dina, thank you for all of the work you're doing around service improvement and for taking the time to create some slides and do the run-throughs. It's been fab. So I think I'll ask Ian if we can stop the recording now, but we've got 10 more minutes or so. If anyone has any questions or comments, if they want to come off mute, we're very open to having a chat.